All right, good afternoon, everyone. This is the last and final cross-border roundtable from pimvendors.com. It's the final in our series of 3. If you want, you can see all the previous roundtables on YouTube where we publish them. And we will also publish this one after we have wrapped up. It's not required to do all these before you dive into this one, but we will be sharing a document with all the learnings and a cross-border checklist at the end of this session with all the attendees. So if you want to, revisit all the learnings, you can view them all on YouTube and stick around for this one, obviously. But we will also send out a document with all the learnings summarized. Now, before I sort of fill the full hour with kind of crazy discussions on different topics, I want to hand over the floor to our great moderator, Glyn. Glyn, you have the floor with the audience.
Great. Many thanks, Stefan. Yeah, good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for joining us for this, as Stefan referenced, the third and what is the final edition of a series of roundtables we've been running on the topic of cross-border commerce. The series originally came about after a webinar that we hosted about a year or so ago on the topic of selling across borders. And it sort of highlighted how incredibly broad the topic actually is. And we reckoned needed a bit of a deeper investigation. So here we are back again. The first of the 3 was preparing the cross-border journey. And then we moved on. The second was about achieving efficient cross-border commerce. And today, in the final leg of the journey, we're exploring the future of cross-border commerce. Before I ask each of the panel members to tell us a little about themselves, I'll just give a very brief bit of background on myself. I run a business called Retail Insider, which is a website of opinions and insights. It's on the retail sector with some leisure and hospitality thrown in. We have a bit of a focus on technology and digital developments. We also produce various reports and host events. And it's also a pleasure sometimes to be invited to chair roundtables for other organizations, such as PIM vendors in this case. Certainly hope in the next 50 or so minutes will be particularly interesting, because certainly our discussions to date, we've discovered that cross-border commerce touches many companies. Also, it includes many companies who don't actually know they're involved in cross-border activity. It's often perceived as crossing international borders, but it actually encompasses things like regional borders within the same country, which brings in things like different cultures in different regions, etc. But before I say any more, let's bring in the panel at this stage, and I'll just ask each of our experts to briefly introduce themselves, and in no particular order, we will start with Justin. You want to just brief background about yourself, please?
Hi, Glenn. Thank you very much, and thank you very much for inviting us to the third session. My name is Justin Thomas. I'm the sales director for Precisely Interworks. We are a global organization. Roughly about 2,500 people. We service the 99 of the Fortune 100 companies with solutions. You may be scratching your head and saying which one of those 99 you don't service, and that would be Tesla. Actually, is the only one that we don't service. And I'm responsible for our product information management and master data management solutions across EMEA and APAC, and I'm joining you from a very wet and windy London today, but it's great to be here. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Justin. And moving on, Dagmar, you've got a brief intro, please.
Hello, everyone, and glad to be here. My name is Dagmar Schneider. I'm the managing director and at the same time working as a business architect for Lighthouse Integration. We are an integration company, obviously. The name says it already. And we are helping customers to connect different systems, whether that's a PIM or whether that's a CMS, and get them all together so that there is a seamless experience for the users and a good outcome, a good product at the end.
Lovely. Great. Thank you very much, Dagmar. Rupert?
Hi, everyone. As you can see, I'm Rupert. I am with InRiver. We're a leading vendor of PIM software, so software as a service, and we have about 1,500 brands using our platform. I've got about 15 years experience with PIM and DAM, and my passions are around customer experience, audience engagement, and of course using product data to support the customer journey.
Thank you, Rupert. And last but certainly not least, Harold, do you want to give a brief intro, please?
Yeah, so thanks for the invitation. So being the third time into this roundtable, it almost feels like a chat with friends at home, at somebody's home. I am senior consultant at Via Medici. Via Medici, we are also one of the leading providers of PIM and MDM solutions. Also globally active, and I'm particularly proud of our customer retention rate, which is, as somebody told me, above 99% since the beginning of our company some 20 years ago.
Great. Thank you, Harold. And during this chat between friends, we're going to look to hopefully cover off three broad areas. Firstly, we've got the future, what's on the horizon. That's the, I guess, crystal ball looking component of this session. And then we'll look at how does that relate to now. We'll look to bring things back from the future to something like a 1 year-ish time frame. And then finally, as a bit of a call to action, if you like, we'll then be looking at maybe what organizations could be doing today on their cross-border journey. Through the session, I'll be throwing a variety of questions at our panel, but it'd be also great to hear from yourselves as well. So if you do have any questions, then type those in on YouTube or LinkedIn, whichever platform you're viewing this from. And I'll look to bring them in wherever possible, if relevant. For more specific questions, then Stefan will be picking those up and he will seek to answer those ones for you individually wherever possible. Right, moving on, the first topic, as highlighted, is the future, with a little bit of a look into the crystal ball of where we might be going with cross-border commerce. But just as a starter, slightly philosophical question, I guess we could say here, what do we mean by the future? What sort of timeframes could we be looking at? Rupert, as the future-looking starter here, what's your views in terms of what should we be looking at from a future perspective?
So in terms of timescales, I think things are moving quite rapidly and have moved quite rapidly. There have been a lot of companies that have gone forward with digital transformations. I think COVID accelerated retail by about 5 years. And I see going to new borders as an extension of this. We're seeing a lot of activity in B2B, particularly around builders merchants, for example, a bit random. That's something that we're seeing a lot of, and less so on the retail side. It's more B2B that we're seeing at the moment. But yes, the short answer there, very fast, it's happening quickly, and even more old-fashioned companies that traditionally wouldn't do this stuff, we're seeing them put their foot on the gas.
Right. Okay. Thank you, Rupert. Harold, what's your observations on this one?
Well, speaking of timeframes, Rupert mentioned it. It was an interesting question. I have a recall from a recent talk that when I think about the future, I think in a time frame of at least 3 to 5 or more years, with the bigger changes. And thinking of a shorter time frame, I perceive there's this a movement in crossing borders between systems and between organizations. So companies interchange more data. They don't look just at their own systems. They don't just look at an interface. They look beyond the borders of their organizations. And that's what I perceive becomes increasingly important to also the slower working companies during the past, well, maybe 2 or 3 years.
Okay, great. Thank you, Harold. Dagmar, what's your take on this one?
The first thing I would like to do is point out that there are different timeframes. I think, Glyn, you've asked it a little bit, and to talk about it, there is the time frame of just the next year or perhaps 2, but then there is also that far away time frame, far away already 5 years, and then there is that the crystal ball thing, what could be very, very far out there, and who is able to already live part of, especially the things that are very, very far out. So looking at the next year is a completely different talk to a customer than looking at where does the customer see themselves in 5 or 10 or how many years. And I think, I'm not sure, I think Rupert said it, it is no longer, I cannot say 5 years because it could all be pressed together and then happen within a year or two, because some outside thing like COVID or something unexpected suddenly compresses everything together. So yes, we have to look at the next year. That's our work, our daily business. And then we also have to look at the longer point because it might be much closer than we think.
We almost never get there wherever it is and however long it takes, do we really? Because it's always a never-ending story, stroke journey. Justin, your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I think I sort of echo what everyone else has said. It's quite interesting. We always, when we're speaking to our customers and our prospects, we do talk about the future. And as any good business, we try and align what our customers generally they say what the future they say their 3 to 5 year plans are with what we're going to achieve and what our goals and objectives are. What I'm seeing, and this has probably been in the last 3 to 4 months, when we're speaking to our customers and prospects and asking them this kind of question, they actually are saying something really interesting. Is they're saying we cannot plan for that event horizon anymore because we just don't know what's going to happen. We have to plan for what's happening in the next year. We've almost got to rein in our 3-year plans and our 3-year aspirations and think of our business slightly differently, saying, well, how can we actually, especially I think what's coming up in 2023 with what's happening in the economy and what's happening with the sort of the global geopolitical environment, people are saying, yes, we would like to think about 3 years, but actually we would like to try and focus on something that's going to deliver a return or help us make decisions in the next 12 months. So it was actually quite a shock, because normally it's quite a nice lead in a discussion. You say, well, what are your 3-year and 5-year plans? And I'm getting a lot of, I wouldn't say pushback, a lot of saying that planning is not happening at the moment. We need to figure out what's going to happen in a shorter time frame.
Well, COVID was referenced, and the last 2 years, which COVID encompassed, is almost sort of, you forget that 2 years. They almost seem to have disappeared. Whatever companies did in that 2 years, it's almost as if it didn't exist to some extent, really.
Yes. It's interesting is people are not really talking about COVID anymore. They're talking about the economy. They're saying, okay, how are we going to? And I think retail is a really interesting sector, because I think that's sort of when things go, when interest rates are increased, when there's challenges with people spending, they are at the forefront. They sort of feel the brunt of it initially. How can they react? How can they optimize their sales, their supply chains? How can they look around this topic? How can they look at other channels of getting their products out to the market when it comes to cross-border? And it's interesting what Rupert said around builders merchants. We're also seeing a lot of that as well. There's a lot of builders merchants saying, look, how can we actually help keep our business going over the next 12 months?
Well, the inflation hits food very quickly, doesn't it? I think we find.
I think it's super important at board level to have both a short-term, medium-term and long-term strategy, because there's some areas that are sort of being talked about quite a lot. I think something that I'm sort of monitoring is the Metaverse, augmented reality, which people are thinking that's not happening. But if you look at the stores that are already there with Nike, Gucci Town, Vans World, even Walmart, and I think this adds another layer of complexity, but at the same time, it can make things easier if you do it right. So I think that is an example of something long-term that people really now need to have on the radar and plan for in the long term. I think that's going to make a big difference. And also, if we talk about customer experience, I think Metaverse can really have a big impact on creating amazing experiences that were normally either bricks and mortar, like Gymshark store in London, or the online experience. I think it has the ability to bring online and bricks and mortar together to sort of converge it. That's something that I'm watching very closely as a long-term strategy.
I can give one.
I would like to sorry, I would just like to jump in and challenge the assertion that Justin has quoted when I think you mentioned some of your customers say, well, we can't plan. We're not going to plan for 3 or 5 years. We're going to plan for 1 year. I would like to challenge this by asking, I anticipate your agreement, by asking, is it even possible to plan for 1 year without alignment to a long-term strategy?
I don't think it is possible, but the challenge is that they've almost got this pressing need in order to do something short term. So I'm pretty sure these organizations in the back end are planning. I mean, no one's running any business is not going to have a 3 or 5 year plan. Yeah. But it's almost like, because what we try and do is paint the picture of where you can be, but often when we're trying to paint that picture, they're trying to rein us in a bit, saying that's great, but what can we do in the next year? Which actually on the one hand is great for the positions that we're in, because it's all about making those decisions. It's all about future-proofing your investment. So making sure that, yes, you will have a 3 and 5 year plan, and whatever you do can meet that uncertainty. But they almost, sort of the organizations are thinking a little bit, how do we huddle together and make sure that we can get through the next 12 months? And what do we need? What decisions do we need to make in order to get the 3 years? They've got to get through the first year initially. And I think if you go back before COVID, people were quite confident about what was going to happen in the next year, so they could do some planning. So there wasn't as much pressure and urgency around the near-term planning, but I think it feels like there's a lot more pressure on that near-term planning. But I do agree with you, Harold. There is going to be a 3 and 5 year plan in there.
So basically, it means we were too complacent in the years before COVID, and now perhaps we could just make a mental note and say that adaptability is one aspect which should form a part of a cross-border strategy.
Yeah.
And also we should not forget that what we experience in our personal lives, which is also insecurity and fear, Angst, as we say in German, also influences us when we are on the job. And we have this German saying, Angst essen Seele auf. So fear eats your soul. You are not making clear decisions about the future. You are getting, you said huddled together. That is the atmosphere that we are all swimming in.
Yeah, I think you have to plan to be nimble and dynamic to change quickly. And I think that's both in the organizational structures and teams, but also in the technology, headless technology, service-oriented architecture. So you can create the interconnects between systems that will allow you to change very, very quickly based on economic trends, market demands. So yeah, plan to be nimble and dynamic, I think, rather than planning over a fixed, to deliver something over a fixed timescale. Things can change so quickly now.
And I think, Rupert,
they have always changed. I mean, you make your first year and you plan for the next years, and it's a moving target. It's always have been that way. And flexibility is a key, let's say, ability in these times. Yeah.
And I think part of that, which I was going to explain what Rupert said, is I'm seeing a lot more interest around the interconnectivity of other systems as well. Because PIM PIM and MDM, they don't sit in their own right. They actually live and breathe by getting information from other systems and sending information to other systems. So investing in an ecosystem that allows you to make those changes on the periphery of your PIM or MDM system is becoming more and more important. So real-time integrations, API-based integrations, so they can actually change these other bits and pieces without completely disrupting what's happening within your PIM.
Yeah, I think quite a lot of the organizations that we're working with are, it's part of a digital transformation, so it's not just PIM. And I think this is a really major point. So when you're looking at your ecosystem, whether it's PIM, e-commerce, marketplace, order management systems, fulfillment, all of those have to be looked at together. They have to be able to talk to each other, and you need to have the teams in place culturally in the organization to support those. So yeah, the interconnect, the APIs between them, it's all really critical to get that in place in order to scale it and change quickly.
Great, thank you, Rupert. Just moving on, I'm just thinking in terms of as we do, whatever the timeframes we're looking at, could we be looking at a situation where we effectively not dealing with any borders at all? Where everything has become this sort of personalized, automated, decentralized system, etc. And we don't have, effectively borders are all eradicated and we can just seamlessly operate.
It boils down to the border of the individual. You have an individual customer, whether that's a B2B or B2C, it doesn't matter. There is an individual customer and that border will always be there. The more individual you have your own approach, the more borders you'll actually have to cross. So yes, it could be that country borders fall, although we saw in the COVID time as well that they came up again. So they could go away, but you will have to face more detailed borders in your target groups. And when you go deeper and deeper into the individuals' situations, then you're looking there for your border.
Will that be a doable prospect then, do you feel?
From my perspective, I would say definitely yes. I have seen systems, and I'm not going to say names now. I have seen systems who are completely capable of doing this. And being so detailed in the approach and at the same time taking care of that information to target into the individual homes or into the individuals' lifestyles, it's totally possible, yes.
I think the borders will become increasingly more invisible. And if you look at the statistics, I think about 75% of consumers are buying across borders. And do they even realize that? I think the answer to that question is probably no. And you've also got, I know in the UK, there's new tax and import agreements that have been put in place globally that make that cross-border function easier. So I think to the end user, those borders are in some cases completely invisible, but to the organizations that are selling, they're less visible. But when you look at the fulfillment systems and fulfillment companies, you can also make that less visible to the organization that's selling as well. So I think in some cases, they're becoming almost invisible. In other cases, the borders will always be there and will present challenges, I think.
Right, okay. Yeah, Harold, which camp do you drop into? Do you feel the borders will always be there, or will they eradicate over time through technology? Intelligent systems, I guess.
There will always be borders. I am with Dagmar and Rupert, especially when it, of course, if we could imagine a world without language borders, without currency borders, without different legal regions. We could imagine a country with a society without different budgets, where everybody's got the same money. So that's gone as well. But when we think all this through, we'll end up at the individuals, and then we have borders plus going from this basis to upwards to new borders or evolving borders. We may have people, organizations who are working cross-border and those who don't. So that's another border. And when we think about different systems, these are other borders. So we could, of course, imagine a world without these borders aside from individuals. But I would rather say some type of border will always be there, but the borders themselves will change. We have experienced the fall of the Berlin Wall plus the Iron Curtain. You have experienced the EU. So now other borders have evolved, like the borders which came up again due to COVID. And so on. So I think there will always be some borders which ask the question, how do you want to cross them, and what are you going to expect beyond these borders?
Yeah, thank you, Harold. Justin, have you anything to add on this one?
I'm actually seeing this from a slightly different angle. So I agree that, like Harold was saying, is there's always going to be borders there. But what we're seeing a lot nowadays is, and Dagmar, we were talking about the customers. What our customers want to do is have a single view of who their customer or vendor is. So they understand. The example that we use, which is quite a basic one, is, Dagmar could have a house in Germany, could have a holiday home in France, and she could be buying products from the same company from different places. Now, if someone wanted to market to Dagmar, they want to see her as a customer 360. So not only from a product perspective, but they want to say, well, actually, we see that Dagmar is investing a lot in, and we talked about building materials. She's doing some home renovations in France, but actually all the invoices are getting to Germany. So actually, we should market to her in Germany based on the products we've got in France. So what they want to do is they want to try and get rid of those. The borders are more internally within their systems, because the system would, see you as two people in two different places, and they can't then marry the products up, and then they can't look at what the total spend is. They can't have a look at marketing. So there's a lot of analytics that you cannot do if you've got these internal clusterings of data and products. So we're seeing a lot of organizations are looking to optimize the existing customers by removing those internal borders to get a single view of the customer, marry it to the product, and then make some really intelligent decisions on how they can grow their business.
Yeah, I think as a trend, what I'm seeing is where organizations have traditionally used a distributor in an overseas market with quite a distance in that relationship. They're wanting to have a direct to consumer or direct to business overseas strategy, cutting out the distributor and using perhaps a fulfillment company, which obviously means they need to be passing data, product data automatically through a channel. But as Justin said, the value isn't just in product sales, it's actually in capturing the data, the data that's coming directly from the customer that they can do analytics on, optimize the journey. And of course, if you're going through a distributor in an overseas territory, you get no data at all. And data, of course, is gold.
Thank you. Thank you, Rupert. Just moving on to that area, and I know we've discussed it because it's inherent to the conversations we've been having in terms of where you automate processes, and we've touched on translation and currencies, etc. Using artificial intelligence and machine learning, etc., how far down the line do you think, in whatever timeframes we're looking at, could we be down whereby we can automate the majority of things? Or obviously translation is maybe an easy one to start with on that. How far down the line do you think we can go in the near midterm? You were nodding slightly, Dagmar, so that gives me the invite to come to you initially.
So translation is definitely a topic where AI or machine learning has already made huge steps forward, and we can all test that by just using Google Translate and test how far did it develop during the last years, from it was totally unusable to actually I can take it, I can just change a few things, and then it's my text, I can send it out. So that is a very, very obvious one. The other area where this comes to bear is the topic we've just left. How do we gather all that information about a person? It's not that easy to handle that big data, as it's called. And that is also an area where AI can definitely help a lot.
Thank you, Dagmar. Anybody else with predictions in terms of how far down the line we can go with automating these components of cross-border trade?
So I think what we're seeing is a lot more around machine learning in the first instance is where we're seeing, because there are a lot of sort of algorithms and predefined ways of doing this. And it's actually quite interesting. I'm starting to see a little bit of a trend around what they call human in the loop machine learning as well. So it's having the machine learning have the algorithms work out. If there's any exceptions, it gets popped out to an individual. They then make a decision. That then is the human in the loop that then provides feedback back to the machine learning, so that your matching and your automation can get better over time. So it's actually a quite interesting combination of not just put it into machine learning algorithm and hopefully it'll get better by itself. There's the human in the loop as well. You can provide that like expert knowledge, which will help train in order to get better over time. So that's something, especially when you're looking at large volumes of data, that's something that we're starting to see happen. But we definitely are seeing, especially in retail, especially in the sort of medium to large, that they want to do as much automation as possible. That they want people managing exceptions, not just approving something that actually you've got a high degree of confidence that it is actually right.
Which is helpful when we have a shortage of people in the mix. Harold,
I think this.
Yeah, sorry, Rupert, you come in first. Fine.
No, go ahead. Harold can go first.
Harold, what's your predictions for our
Thank you, Rupert. So I would like to pick on what Justin has said, like the combination of humans and machines, because even if we call it artificial intelligence, computers and what you call it are still damn stupid. And they're lacking lots of things which we humans just bring with us, like empathy and these things. I would rather see not yet. I would rather see a trend coming, not necessarily to have black or white. Let's just leave humans aside and just go for computers. Translations is a very good example. For instance, that's good for stupid mass data analytics and all that. That's fine with a computer. I would rather see in the more ambitious tasks, what I would call human machine hybrids, where we take the best of both worlds of humans and machines and computers, and we have these hybrids, machine assisted work and these things, especially when it comes to consulting, when it comes to making the best use of analytics, which were done by some artificial intelligence. This would be my prediction, that we have a trend not to replace humans by computers, but to make the best use of computers to assist humans and have this hybrid concept.
That autonomous future we were sort of promised a few years back, it now involves a lot of people, doesn't it? Whereas, I thought it was all going to be, we could just take our hands off the wheel, so to speak.
Yeah. Do you remember the paperless office?
So I actually think that there will be huge changes here, and I think it's not a case of will it happen, but it's when. And if you look at the translation, this neural translation, it's improving at about 5% a year. So my view is that in the future, it could be 5% human. And I think now the figures are saying that it's post-editing is maybe 20 to 40%. And I remember when Google Translator was a swear word, it was just a complete load of junk. But now I've actually had conversations with a Ukrainian friend who didn't speak any English at all, and I actually thought that she was fluent, and it was so good. And we talk about empathy, but there certainly felt like there was empathy there. The other area that I think for AI and ML in cross-border is around chatbots that are now getting very sophisticated. So if you've sold your stuff on marketplaces to China, Kazakhstan, I think you've got the ability to provide centralized support with bots. And I know a lot of companies now only have digital support, which again used to be a swear word, but actually it works. If you have a proper bot that's integrated, it's got visibility of your product data, it's connected to your order management system. That's another area that I see machine learning as having massive, really huge potential. I think the UK is certainly behind the curve there, and I think it's maybe Chinese and some of the sort of Asian markets that are doing really well there.
Can we say that whenever you have a certain task is following a clear, transparent set of rules, it can be done by a computer, and anything else where this doesn't work needs to be guided, assisted whatsoever by a human.
Yeah. It's ultimately the case. Yeah.
I was at a conference. I was at an event. It must be about 3 weeks ago, and they were talking a lot about chatbots. And there's a lot of this is like an RPA event that I was at, and I was speaking to actually the founder of a company who specializes in chatbots, and I asked him, I said, what's making these chatbots really successful nowadays? And I think it's a common theme, combining what Rupert said and Harold said, is you really need to have a lot of access to the data, and you need to have these connected. But the one thing he said was critical to make it successful is, again, this human in the loop. The chatbot then needs to know when it's reached the end of its usefulness. If it solved it, it's fine. If it cannot solve it based on whatever reasons, it doesn't carry on going back and back. It pops into a human in the loop. It then helps with it, and then there's that learning that gets it back so that it can improve over time. So I think that was quite interesting. I didn't expect him. I expected him as a chatbot provider saying, well, it's always the chatbot's going to be the best. He said, no, you need people. It needs to know when to pop it out, who to do it, and then how to get that feedback loop into play.
I think for a chatbot, the translation, or even slightly dirty translation, is actually fine. And I think the best bots are usually a combination of rule-based and pattern-based. But you do need to have them implemented correctly and not just throw them in. And I'm pretty shocked by how sophisticated some of these are when you've put them in properly. But I think that's a great potential for cross-border.
Great, thank you, Rupert, and Justin. Just moving on. I'm not smashing the crystal ball for now. Not quite smashing it, but just moving on to the next block, which is, I guess, bringing things more within like more of what's happening now, what's relatable now, and bringing things maybe into a shorter time frame. But even though I think when we talk about chatbots, that they're clearly here right now, however good they currently operate. But in terms of what you could be doing within like a 1 year time frame, and I think something you referenced previously, Justin, a good start for organizations might well be bringing some of their existing systems a little bit closer together and integrating them. Do you just want to elaborate on that one? Because you briefly touched on it during the previous roundtable.
Yeah, I think a lot of organizations, and I think this stands for all of us, fear that there's going to be implementing a solution like a PIM or an MDM solution is like a rip and replace. You're going to have to like go reach into the guts of the organization, rip something out, replace. It's going to be a massive project. But we're seeing a lot of this theme around extend and reuse. You've already got assets, you've already got a lot of this data. How do you all the systems, I think, ourselves included, should be able to integrate to some degree. Some will do better than others, but take advantage of the data that you've got, focus on what a common set of use cases are, make sure that you reuse this data throughout your organization, and start on that as quickly as possible. It doesn't need to be a massive project that's going to take many
years
in order to implement. You can actually start quicker. There's some great technology and people as well, because we've got the likes of Dagmar and Harold here who can actually help you with a lot of experience on how to implement these things quickly.
Right, thank you, Justin. Now I will bring you in, Dagmar, because I know one of the big headaches is integration, and you've clearly got integration in front of you on the screen right now.
That also answers partly the question that was posted into the chat. How does each solution take the short-term and long-term hurdle? I'm not going to answer in detail on the different solutions, but one thing to look for is how good is the entry point into the system and the exit point. So how good is the possibility to integrate with any given system? How modern is it to integrate with that system? Does it already follow the more modern paths, or is it still working on a completely, let's say, Java-based API as one example? Or do you have these modern ways and even possibilities to use webhooks or go directly deeply into consumer development and tie that system together with other systems that you have? The integration, let me phrase it differently. There is always the option of having that all in one big lump in the middle, but we are moving away from that. The idea was there and everyone went into that direction, but nowadays you will see way more integrations, and it has to be quick. It has to be for a very specific problem, and it doesn't have to be expensive. Next one.
Great. Thank you, Dagmar. Harold, I guess we've got the integration aspect here to maybe think about, and then obviously the original point was, I guess, to some extent leveraging your existing assets. What's your view on those two components?
I would like to thank Dagmar and Justin for the inspiration, because Dagmar, your keyword was integration. And when you said, well, integration, it's not costly, it's cheap, and it just has to work. It's everything is there when we have systems which have the option to integrate easily. And if we do have integrated systems, borders disappear. We don't have to cross any borders because we have one integrated system, and we have to look beyond. That's your keyword, Justin, because the borders are the perceived borders in the brains of the people, in the culture of a company, because everything's there. The tools are there. I take the culture and say all of the tools we implement, we're trying to sell, Justin, Rupert and myself, they're all ready for the future. They offer all the opportunities, all the options you need. You just have to do it, and you have to cross the borders, and you have to overcome the borders in your heads because they don't exist. All the assets are there. All the interfaces or the integration opportunities exist. And when you realize that's the most difficult part, is to realize it. And then you just have to do it. You have to think in terms of end-to-end processes.
Thank you, Harry. Rupert.
I think this is far easier than it used to be years ago. I mean, if you go back 10 or 15 years or 20 years, trying to get two systems to talk to each other was an absolute nightmare. And then it was really only the enterprise organizations that could get those systems to talk to each other. I think now you've got, with the maturity of systems, whether it's a PIM ERP, order management system, there were solutions for the SME market. You can even have someone that's, doing some trade as an individual can set up a web shop. They can integrate with marketplaces, that they can get the whole shebang working really quickly with standard integrations. So I think this has made it more accessible to SMEs in addition to the enterprise space. And I think this can also be done quick and dirty. I mean, previous to my time at InRiver, I believed in doing things in a big bang approach. InRiver actually takes a land and expand approach, which I now really believe in. So if you take a business unit, a business entity, use that as a pilot, get your processes optimized around that single business unit that you've chosen based on priority, and then do the rest. And it's so much easier than it used to be. It's just a case of being strategic and working out where you can get the most value in the short term to prove to get success with your leadership team.
Thank you, Rupert. I'm just thinking the next question is going to be about the requirement of flexibility in systems, and I'm just wondering whether it's sort of a given nowadays in terms of whichever solutions you look to implement, because we all know. In this, I guess, post-COVID, if we can call it post-COVID, and these economic changes, that everything changes. Cross borders change. There's certain countries you would have been doing trade with a year ago, you're not doing trade for various political reasons right now. I'm just wondering, what is flexibility inherent in all these systems, or are some systems giving you much more agile capabilities? If that's a question, I hope that's a question.
Yes.
That's a question.
I think you can't exist nowadays without having a flexible system. It's just not possible to do business. It has to be open. It has to be extensible. It has to be flexible. I think there are going to be different levels of flexibility, but I think you also got to think about how flexible our customers can be. So the people we're selling to, they've got to be ready. They've got the systems in place. We could say we've got this great open platform, you can run it headless. We've got all these APIs that are clearly documented, but unless the organizations we're dealing with are available to consume, those APIs, or they've got the systems in place, sometimes we see, the challenge is not on our side. It's our customers not ready. They don't have. What's interesting, we touched quite a bit about people. I would say at the moment, one of the biggest barriers we have to success is the availability of our customers' resources to run the projects. Yes. They've got too many projects to run. They've got too much reliance on technical resources. They've got a huge amount of pressure on their budget, and that's where the bottleneck is, which is quite interesting. and frustrating at the same time. Actually, it'll be interesting to see or hear, Dagmar and Harold and Rupert's view on that as well.
You've nailed it there. We have the same. We face the same problems. We are running into difficulties and delays because the customer doesn't have the resources available. The one resource that could potentially help you in your project has 5 other projects, and you're putting a date in for a meeting that potentially might happen in a few weeks. And during these weeks, what do? So you're waiting for that decision.
Yeah. Thanks, Dagmar.
Rupert.
Sorry, Harold.
Sorry. Okay. Rupert, no, you first, please.
Okay, cool. Thank you. So, mirror what everyone said there. Lack of resources, lack of specific technical expertise. That's where we're seeing delays with projects. To put my techie hat on, I think where we see legacy systems, they're a nightmare to integrate with, and also they need a lot of resources to integrate. So where you've got these old systems that were architected 20 years old, it might take 30 man days to build an API into it. Whereas if it's a modern scalable architecture in River, they're pretty easy to work with, and you can integrate pretty quickly. Just kind of throwing that in there from a techie, not a sales perspective.
Do you get any sales views? So I'm sorry, I mean tech perspective, Harold.
I was just wondering which hat I might describe I'm going to put on right now. It's not the techie hat. It's what I perceive is not necessarily not only lack of resources, but also lack of want by the business people. They seem to be unaware of the possibilities which we have nowadays. They still think in terms of, it's just one of these IT projects. They want a budget, but they in many cases they lack the imagination, and they lack the awareness of wanting things which they think are not possible.
I would like to hold up a torch for these guys, because most of them are so deep down the rabbit hole of daily business. There is not a lot of time to get inspired and have the vision for the future. So I know that because I'm dealing with them on a daily basis. But yeah, I agree.
No harm taken. I was just describing the symptom, not the reasons.
Yes, and it is definitely, it's a hindrance that people are, I don't want to change. Any change would mean that I need time to do that change, and so on. So, yeah.
I think there's more rabbit holes than there used to be, really, Anyway, that's a philosophical bit of thinking, Harold. Anyway, I'm just moving on. In the 10 minutes or so we've got left, just bringing things up to, I guess, what you can do today, call to action if you like. Just one of the thoughts was in that hope is not a strategy. And I know one of you will remind me who said the quote of the best time to start was yesterday. The next best moment is today. And I think we also have some story relating to a tree, and I forget the gist of it. I don't know if somebody wants to remind what the tree bit is. And anyway, the point in this last block is just to give your thoughts in terms of what might be calls to action for everybody out there listening to this conversation. So do you want to start with the tree story?
Should I go ahead, Justin, or do you want to?
If it's relevant.
It's always relevant. A very wise person told me, very wise person told me this great story where they were asked, when is the best time to plant a tree? And someone said the best time to plant a tree is 20 years ago. And this is where the vision comes in. But the next best time to plant a tree is today. So I think that's a good lead, and thank you very much for doing, because that was a very that stuck in my mind.
We don't want to forget the tree. Anyway, so on that note, what are the actions you would be suggesting to organisations who maybe are short of resources? They are trading across these borders, however we choose to define them now. What would be your calls to action for them?
I would say, I'll start with that, and I'm sure that the team will follow. But I think it's really important to partner with someone who not only provides the technology, but it's the implementation and consulting experience in order to make it work. you can't plug a gap if there's a key technical resource, within our customer's organization that needs to get something done. You can't replace that, but you can surround them with really good people who can help with ideas and solutions in order to get these projects going. I would think, and this sort of goes back to what we were saying a little bit earlier on, is yes, in order to achieve your 3-year goals, in order to achieve your plans, you actually have to do something this year. A lot of companies are bunkering in and being quite conservative. But I think because your PIM and your master data is such a key part of your organization, you have to focus on it. A lot of our existing customers have weathered the storm and are going to weather the storm because they've got the ability to do this automation, to understand who the customers are, to understand what their best-selling products are, to manage to optimize their supply chain by having these solutions in place. So I know I joked a bit about that analogy, but a lot of our organizations, when we speak to them, saying we wish we'd actually made this decision in the middle of COVID when it was really tough, because we didn't realize that it's still going to be tough moving out. So I think that's an absolutely key takeaway. But I'll open the floor to the rest of it. Maybe Dagmar might have some insight, because she was nodding when I was talking about the tree analogy. So
Dagmar's a great panelist, because she nods and you do feel inclined to go straight to her, which is really helpful. Thank you, Dagmar, for doing that over the course of these 3 roundtables.
Yeah, first of all, it's an old Chinese adage with the tree, with the 20 years. And yeah, definitely. What I think is really, really important, if you think of your available time as 100%, then make the decision of taking, let's say, 10% of that time. And if you can't do that, take 5%. And if you cannot do that, take 1%. But decide to take some time aside to talk and think about strategy, about the future, and to do the next steps. Not just talk, not just concepts, but actually do something. If you don't, you will be eaten up 120% and you will never get there. You will just be forced at some point, and you will always be behind because you did not take that time. So for me, it's the most important part to decide the decision that you make and to follow through, take away some of your time, and only talk about strategy, only make strategy, and only implement what you want to have in a year.
Great, thank you, Dagmar. Rupert, do you want to follow on from that?
I think this is one of the most important things I see here is lack of ownership. So I think it's really important that someone owns this. I think it's good to set up a localization team, and that could be one person, it could be half a person's job, or it could be a team of 20 people. And I think that team should report to leadership level, and I think they should put together a plan and evaluate what's possible. And in terms of moving quickly, I mean, this might sound a bit dirty, but I would look at what competitors are doing, what similar companies are doing in the market, what's not working with competitors and similar companies, and copy it. That sounds quite brutal, but I think that can speed up progress for organizations that are behind the curve. And that can also mean that they don't make the short-term mistakes. If you take that strategy, I think you've then got the potential to prove to the business that the strategies are viable, and then get the ability to get more funding, to grow the business, and to widen your strategy.
And that's the advantage of not being the first mover to some extent there, isn't it, Rupert, really? In being able to see the learnings from other organizations if you are slightly behind the curve at this stage.
Mm-hmm.
Harold.
Well, my answer has 2 parts. The first part will basically second what all the others have said. Make a decision, do some focus time, and get help. So by get help means ask those people who are in the business for quite some time, who have done that before, and don't be too intimidated by this heavyweight word of, oh, we are doing cross-border commerce. It all comes down to, well, fairly standard procedures affecting your systems, affecting your organization. getting out of the rabbit hole or making yourself free from being prisoner of your daily business. I second what Dagmar has said, and I would like to add one crucial thing, which is very important. Give yourself make a conscious decision not to do anything else. So if you have decided for a strategic project, be it cross-border commerce, be it something else, make the conscious decision to leave everything else aside. Because what's crucial, what's a success criteria to waste your time and resources is to try and do too many things at once. It will end up in doing nothing.
Just so add to
try to forget anything else. So that's a key point.
Thanks, Al. Yeah,
decide on what you do, and especially make it clear that you don't do the other stuff.
There are a lot of organizations out there that specialize in this logistical piece as well. So they're experts in Amazon fulfillment, they're experts in e-commerce. So look at the consulting companies, because there are a lot of companies that do this, both consulting and the execution of this. They've made the mistakes. They can also start you on your journey if you prefer to go the outsourced route.
Thanks, Rupert. Yeah, just one thought I'd had. I know this session has been predominantly looking into the future, but we've talked about systems and we've talked about processes, but it's just amazing how important the people component. It seems like every part we've discussed has had people absolutely integral to the development of cross-border. So there's, even though we move into this futuristic future, it's still the people are absolutely integral to everything. It appears to.
Isn't that great?
Yeah, we've literally got a couple of minutes. I don't know. Does anybody else want to add anything at this stage? Just to make any last points in terms of, as I say, call to action was the key theme. Just to get on the journey. I guess if organisations aren't on the journey or are just at the early stages in the lower foothills, I could say.
I would say, don't be. It could seem like a daunting task, but there are so many people who are doing it. There's so many great organizations out there that can help you. A lot of them on this call today as well. There's a huge amount of learning and experience. So this has been done before. We talked about the sort of first move. A lot of the first moves have been done already. So you'll be in safe hands, and you'll definitely see the results. I was speaking to a customer when was it, a couple of days ago. I hadn't spoken for a while, and they said, I'm implementing the solution. It used to take them 4 days to launch a new product. They can now do it in 2 hours. And it's like you can make a measurable change to your business, and you'll be a shining light in your business. You'll be able to put your hand up and saying, this is what we can do to the business. We've managed to make these massive changes. We're not talking about 10% improvement or 20% improvement. You can make incredible improvements and changes and have real business benefits, which will impact your business and the people working with the systems. You just got to take that first step. You just got to plant that tree.
I think my closing statement on this would be, this can be really disruptive and distracting for an organization on a cultural level. This can be the CEO's pet and distract you from your own market that's providing the revenue to your company. So focus on your local area. Don't let it distract you, but also execute on your localization too.
Great, thank you. Thank you for that, Rupert. I think that sort of pretty much brings actually one just final point from it. I think a lot of organisations realised during COVID that they can actually achieve a lot more than they ever thought they could within very short timeframes, and by cutting out lots of meetings, hierarchy, etc. Anyway, time has ticked by. We're going to have to wrap things up at this stage, I'm afraid. I'd like to thank each of our panel members for their terrific input in this third roundtable, and also for the series as a whole. I hope it's been informative to all of you who checked in this afternoon, and that it's answered some of your questions around cross-border commerce. I'd also like to thank Stefan and Pim Vendors for putting this series of events together and for inviting me to be a part of them. Certainly been an interesting few afternoons for myself, so it's great to be a part of that. I'm hoping that there will be some further roundtables in the future. in 2023. So I guess it's watch this space. On that note, I'll say goodbye, and I will hand you over to Stefan. Thank you very much, Stefan.
Thanks, Glenn. Yeah, it's the final in the series, but looking back at this one, I see we have learned that there are lots of developments in AI and machine learning, working on translations, operations, the rule-based stuff. But I think there's also a lot of development in the generative AI part. So maybe we didn't touch on that too much, but GPT-3 and soon 4, for people watching the space, that generates text like humans would do. It's very impressive, very scary as well. DALL-E for image generation. And I think that we are starting to see combinations that create inspirational images or product images from scratch, including descriptions and texts that trigger you to buy stuff. Still, it's scary because I think we all are doing this just to generate a human-to-human interaction. So it's going to be an interesting 3 to 5 years. Let's put it that way. And I think if you want to get ready for that period, just start, right? I'm not gonna repeat the planting a tree analogy, but it's important, and I want to sort of emphasize that it's very easy to just get started. I would say our website is a great start for PIM vendor, for PIM related information and also PIM related tools. We have a bunch of free tools available, and I mean, you're already watching this this roundtable, so you have already started in a way. As an attendee, you will get a free cross-border checklist with the learnings from all of our roundtables, and obviously there will be a recorded session of this one published, but we'll also refer you back to the original recordings of the other sessions. There is one event coming up from PIM vendors that I want to highlight, and that is a lightning demo that will come on the 15th of December, where we have 3 tools that will pitch their solution on a workflow-related topic. So they will highlight how they manage PIM workflows. It's going to be super engaging and super interesting to see, 1 hour, 3 tools on how they approach this subject that we see much more often in the requirements that from our customers. And I see that I've left our speakers in the dark. The evening has set, even though it is still officially afternoon, at least in Central Europe. I really want to thank the panel. We have been through this journey in multiple sessions and have become sort of there is a bond there. We saw that before we went live, and I really want to thank you all for joining us, the audience, PIM vendors, so often and going with us on this journey from starting to, I would say, finishing, or the future of cross-border. And I want to thank Lynn for hosting not just this session, but all the sessions that we did, especially on this cross-border session or series. And I want to thank you, the audience, for listening. So thank you, have a good evening, and see you the next time.